Now, in another 72 hours, the clock will wind down on 2013. Champagne corks will pop as we welcome yet another brand new year, 2014. Welcome to Talk Africa. For Africa, 2013 has been a year of mixed outcomes. It's been a year that started on a high with African leaders meeting in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to chart a new path for the resurgent continent. But it would end on a rather sad note, though, celebratory, with the passing of Nelson Mandela, a global icon and 20th century's last great liberator. 2013 will also go down as the year Africa tried to reassert her sovereignty. Analysts interpreted the outcome of elections in Kenya and in Zimbabwe as an expression of this independence. The fruits of the Arab revolutions remained rather elusive, and 3 years after 26-year-old Tunisian Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire, triggering a wave of revolts across the Arab north, Egypt remains in turmoil while militias hold sway in Libya. Now, only Tunisia appears to be stabilizing, but 2013 continued to witness Africa's growing global economic importance. The leaders of the world's two biggest economies, the United States and China, underscored this growing importance when they visited the continent. Now, this optimism across Africa was, however, shattered by a resurgence of terrorism. As the Islamist group Al-Shabaab carried out a bloody attack in Nairobi, while in Nigeria, the Boko Haram sustained a bloody campaign. The Maghreb remains a deadly hunting ground for Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists. Conflict continued to stretch Africa's fragile peace and security architecture, and no sooner had the ink on the Eastern Congo peace deal dried up than South Sudan appeared to implode. The world's youngest nation appeared to be sliding into civil war amidst efforts to bring the warring factions to the dialogue table. On the economic front, though, Africa ends 2013 on a bullish note, with the Africa Development Bank painting a rosy picture of a continent resilient to internal and external shocks and a growing role in an ailing global economy. The bank projects growth acceleration from the current 4.8% to 5.3% in 2014. Well, let's take a look at some of the events that shaped 2013. In January, leaders of a resurgent Africa gathered in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Organization of African Unity, today the African Union. Now, the mantra at the summit was Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance. There is no denying Africa her rebirth.
Africa is on the rise. There's no denying Africa her rebirth. The mantra at the January summit was Pan-Africanism and Africa Renaissance.
The continent has not only embraced Pan-Africanism over the many decades, but it's been a thread that has seen us through most of our difficult days during our struggles. And in fact, it was that Pan-Africanism that led to the creation of the Organization of African Unity in 1963.
In the last 5 decades, Pan-Africanism has encouraged solidarity. It's based on the belief that unity is vital to economic, social and political progress and aims to unify and uplift people of African descent. Pan-Africanism declares the fate of all African peoples and countries as intertwined. It's built on the principle that African peoples, both on the continent and in the diaspora, share not merely a common history, but a common destiny.
Africa is celebrating the resilience of the African people. I believe that what has kept us going is because we are a continent of resilient people, burdened by slavery, burdened by colonialism, burdened by democracy, burdened by the fight against corruption, and all this, and structural adjustment. And the African is still standing. So I think what I will celebrate is the resilience of the African people.
Pan-Africanism stresses the need for collective self-reliance. Kwame Nkrumah, the founding father of Pan-Africanism, and its advocates, such as Muammar Gaddafi, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X and W.E.B. Du Bois, postulated that solidarity would enable the African people to achieve self-reliance. Solidarity, they argued, would allow the continent's potential to independently provide for its people to be fulfilled.
There is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that, after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
2013 will go down as the year Africa fought back to reassert her sovereignty.
In March, Kenyans elected Uhuru Kenyatta as president and William Ruto his deputy, in a move widely interpreted by analysts as a referendum on the International Criminal Court. Both leaders are facing crimes against humanity charges at the Hague-based court.
I therefore use this opportunity to salute the Kenyan voters again for rejecting that blackmail and upholding the sovereignty of the people of Kenya.
Before the vote, Western diplomats appeared to openly take a stand and warned Kenyan voters about the consequence of their choices.
We're all here as envoys. Our mandate is to favor conducive, good, fruitful relations for a prosperous Kenya. But that must be absolutely clear. The last thing we want is to interfere in the internal affairs.
I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
President Kenyatta adopted a Look East policy following his election.
Kenya will indeed continue to focus on expanding our trading partners going forward, and definitely the East is a new growing market, and this is an area that we will continue to focus on and to see how we can strengthen our trading ties, our political links. We also believe that we have the capacity to get technology that is much more appropriate to our needs by looking at some of our new partners. We want to expand our horizon.
The African Union threw its weight behind Kenya in her quest to defer the cases, but Kenyatta's case appears to be on the brink of collapse after the ICC chief prosecutor Fatou Bensouda suggested that she didn't have enough evidence to prosecute the Kenyan leader. Gutted by years of Western-imposed economic sanctions, the outcome of Zimbabwe elections in July was interpreted in some quarters as a protest vote against the West.
We are delivering democracy in a platter, on a platter. Do you take it? We say take it or leave it.
ZANU-PF's Robert Mugabe extended his 33-year hold on power with a landslide victory over perennial challenger Morgan Tsvangirai of the MDC. African Union and SADC observers gave the vote a clean bill of health.
Our observation is that there are incidences that could have been avoided. There are incidences that even tended to have breached the law. But all in all, up to the close of the poll, we do not believe that these incidences will amount to not the result, not representing the will of the people.
President Mugabe has remained defiant in the face of years of crippling sanctions. However, recent years have witnessed the sanctions slowly being lifted.
tough on trade, conflicts over currency, and connecting economies around the world. From Tokyo to Shanghai and Mumbai, BizAsia links you live to the markets and brings you all the latest in business from China's unique perspective. BizAsia, a smart investment for your time.
International news with the global perspective. World Insight is the only program with analysis from around the world, with lively discussions and feature reports. Tune in each week for World Insight, only on CCTV News.
In December 2010, 26-year-old Tunisian Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire to protest a life of misery and lack of hope in spite of his college education. Now, his death touched off a wave of revolts across the Arab North, toppling decades-old governments in Tunisia, Libya and Egypt.
3 years on, there isn't much to celebrate.
Unemployment, corruption, imbalanced development were all the factors that sent people to the streets 3 years ago. But ironically, all these problems remain in the country. They only got worse. The rate of unemployment is soaring.
Libya has sunk into deeper anarchy. Militias have tried to carve out and run mini-states within a state. The abduction from a luxury hotel in October of Libyan Prime Minister Ali Zidane highlighted the security threat posed by the militias that have been rampant in the country since the revolution that ousted Muammar Gaddafi 2 years ago.
This is a huge mistake that the West has done after the removal of Gaddafi. One, we did see the effects of Libya and the militias that emanated from Libya and the arms that came out of Libya after the death of Gaddafi happening in Mali. Most of the Tuaregs who actually constituted the individuals who were fighting alongside the Gaddafi.
Egypt remains volatile. Mohamed Morsi, the country's first democratically elected president in years, was overthrown by the military in July. Top Constitutional Court Judge Adli Mahmoud Mansour was sworn in as interim leader. But Morsi and his supporters remain defiant in a deeply polarized country.
Muslim Brotherhood is one of the largest reform movements in the Muslim world that has been for 85 years working, and its membership not in Egypt only but all around the Muslim world in millions. So it is a big idea, aims to reform the Muslim world, and it will not die.
The roadmap unveiled when the military ousted Morsi indicated that a parliamentary election should take place before the presidential one. But a draft constitution that's since been finalised is silent on which vote should happen first, creating more uncertainty in the North African country.
Amidst the isolated cases of strife, Africa continued its impressive economic growth in 2013, maintaining high importance as an emerging global economic player. Visits by leaders of the world's two biggest economies underscored this importance.
In March, Chinese President Xi Jinping made a 6-day, 3-nation tour of Africa to deepen his country's ties with the continent. He visited Tanzania, Congo, Brazzaville and South Africa.
In 2012, bilateral trade grew to nearly $200 billion between China and Africa. People-to-people exchanges reached over 1.5 million. China's direct investment to Africa has reached $15 billion. In the past 50 years, China sent 18,000 medical personnel to Africa. 250 million African people have been medically treated. People in Africa have also provided great support and selfless help to the Chinese people.
President Xi pledged to facilitate major bilateral cooperation projects between China and Africa. In Durban at the 5th BRICS Summit, he stressed stronger cooperation with the bloc's membership.
This is also an important opportunity for BRICS business leaders. I suggest you explore the feasibility of big project cooperation, for example, infrastructure development, emerging industries R&D, and local currency settlement in the financial sector. This will help the growth of enterprises and also intergovernmental cooperation.
US President Barack Obama came calling 3 months after the Chinese leader's visit.
It is highlighting 3 countries in 3 different regions of the world, Anglophone and Francophone, in East Africa, in Southern Africa, and in West Africa. Countries that are committed to democracy.
Obama visited Senegal and 2 of the countries President Xi Jinping had visited, Tanzania and South Africa. He described his initiative as a partnership of equals.
I actually welcome the attention that Africa is receiving from countries like China and Brazil and India and Turkey. Because, number one, the more interest they show in Africa, the more tools we have and mechanisms we have to further incorporate Africa into the global economy, which has the potential of creating jobs and businesses and opportunity. So I don't feel threatened by it. I think it's a good thing. Now, I do think that it's important for Africans to make sure that these interactions are good for Africa.
Obama's visit came with a backdrop of accusations that his administration was paying less attention to Africa compared to those of his predecessors George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, as well as such rising economic powers as China, India and Brazil. Figures show that China surpassed the United States as Africa's largest trading partner nearly 4 years ago.
Well, Talk Africa is reviewing Africa in 2013. To stay with us.
Culture Express. See the world in color.
Make major investments in China.
In China, why we are living for.
That's a fundamental government.
Position on China's by leaders.
I think that's for that would be
have a dialogue, political change and human rights. Don't you think human rights?
Dialogue. Ideas matter.
– 2013 also witnessed a resurgence of terrorism in Africa.
In September, masked gunmen attacked the upmarket Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi, laying a deadly 4-day siege that left at least 70 people dead.
I report with great sadness that 61 civilians lost their lives in the attack. 6 security officers also made the ultimate sacrifice to defeat the criminals.
The Islamist group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. The terror group said it was carried out in retaliation for Kenya's military campaign in Somalia. The attack on Westgate was a culmination of a series of other small-scale terrorist attacks throughout the year in Nairobi, Mombasa and parts of northern Kenya.
We shall not relent on the war on terror. We will continue that fight, and we urge all people of goodwill throughout the world to join us and to ensure that we uproot this evil.
Earlier in the year, Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists took over 800 people hostage at the Tiganturim gas facility near In Amenas in Algeria. At least 39 foreign hostages were killed. The Maghreb remains awash with deadly armed groups, a spillover of the Libyan conflict. In Nigeria, Boko Haram continues to wage a bloody insurgency. Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan has declared an all-out war against the insurgents.
We can no longer sit down and watch people being killed. And it must stop. Excesses of Boko Haram must stop.
Now, 2013 tested and stretched Africa's fragile peace and security architecture.
South Sudan erupted into deadly violence only days after the Eastern Congo peace deal was signed.
I want to assure you that peace and not war, hope and not despair will all be achieved in this country. Our people suffered too long during the decades of the liberation struggle. As such, I do not really want to see them going through all experience again.
The violence that erupted in Juba on December 15th quickly spread, dividing the landlocked country of 10.8 million along ethnic lines of Nuer and Dinka. To prevent more chaos in the fragile Horn of Africa region, East African leaders under IGAD and Western powers tried to broker a truce between President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, who he sacked as his deputy in July.
We're here to understand the situation firsthand, and I would like to inform you that we had a very productive meeting with His Excellency President Salva Kiir, and we will continue the consultations, and we will let you know, as soon as we have, some more information.
The violence has uprooted some 45,000 civilians who are seeking protection at UN bases.
This is a political crisis which requires a peaceful political solution. In this season of peace, I urge the leaders of South Sudan to act for peace. Stop the violence, start the dialogue, save your proud and duly independent country. There is no time to lose.
South Sudan seceded from Sudan in 2011 under a peace agreement to end decades of war, but relations with Sudan have remained frosty. The eruption of violence in South Sudan overshadowed gains made in ending the conflict in eastern Congo. A peace deal signed in Nairobi on December 12 between President Joseph Kabila's government in Kinshasa and the M23 rebels formally ended a 20-month insurgency led by General Sultani Makenga in eastern Congo.
I stand here today to tell you that the war that these rebels waged against this town of Rutshuru was the last, and it's over.
The quick defeat of the M23 by a UN Force Intervention Brigade comprising largely of South African and Tanzanian soldiers raised new questions about the future of peacekeeping in Africa. The fragility of the African peace and security architecture continued to be badly exposed in 2013, when France twice intervened in African conflicts. In January, French special forces launched Operation Serval after Islamists captured the strategic town of Konna, located 600 kilometers from Mali's capital, Bamako. The African Union appeared to hesitate as the rebels marched towards Bamako. French troops remain in the Central African Republic, where rebel leader turned president Michel Djotodia is struggling for control.
Notre programme est ambitieux.
We know our program is ambitious and it needs a lot of money, but we think we must depend on ourselves first before involving the international community. This is what we are doing right now.
South Africa's first black president and anti-apartheid icon Nelson Mandela died on December the 5th at the age of 95, ending a historic political transformation journey.
Fellow South Africans, our beloved Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, the founding president of our democratic nation, has departed.
President Jacob Zuma broke the news to a stunned but prepared world. A world that had spent several months praying for a man who inspired millions across generations in his lifetime. Mandela led South Africa's transition from white minority rule in the 1990s after 27 years in prison for his political activities.
I have fought very firmly against white domination. I have fought very firmly against black domination. I cherish the ideal of a new South Africa where all South Africans are equal.
In death as in life, Nelson Mandela remained the great unifier as world leaders descended on Johannesburg to bid farewell to an iconic and remarkable man. In his honour, East and West came together to pay tribute to a legend on a day the ideological divide blurred. His funeral service at the FNB Stadium in Johannesburg will remain one of the most memorable events of our time. US President Barack Obama, who led world leaders in eulogising the fallen icon, delivered a moving speech in which he described Mandela as the last great liberator of the 20th century.
He would emerge as the last great liberator of the 20th century. Like Gandhi, he would lead a resistance movement. A movement that at its start had little prospect for success.
In his tribute, Chinese Vice President Li Yuanchao expressed his condolences and said the Chinese would always cherish Mandela's contribution to China-South Africa relations.
Mr. Mandela was a known friend of the Chinese people and a household name in China. As one of the founding fathers of China-South Africa relations, Mr. Mandela had committed himself to China-South Africa friendship and China-Africa cooperation with great passion. The Chinese people will always cherish the memory of his important contribution to China-South Africa friendship and China-Africa relations.
President Jacob Zuma, together with the ruling African National Congress, now have the task of managing Mandela's legacy.
Madiba's love for peace was also evident in the work he did in the continent. People of Burundi enjoy peace and democracy today because of the seeds of peace planted by Madiba.
Nelson Mandela was laid to rest in his ancestral home of Kunu.
Well, as Africa bids farewell to 2013, it is our hope that better tidings await the continent in 2014. Now, that has been Talk Africa's Year in Review. Goodbye until next year. I'm Beatrice Marshall from Nairobi.